So for a long time, I called myself an introvert. And to be honest, it made sense because sometimes after being around people, I needed to be alone. Or sometimes in the middle of a conversation, I'd feel this pull to check my phone, or do something else, or just be somewhere quieter. And I assumed that meant that I was just someone who needed less people, less social, more alone time. Simply introvert. So here's the thing, I actually enjoy talking to people. When I am in a good conversation, a real one, not a small talk, I am completely there. I feel energized, present, engaged. So why was I constantly pulling myself away? Why did I keep reaching for my phone in the middle of situations I actually wanted to be in? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that the label I had given myself wasn't quite right. It wasn't that I was introverted. It was I was overstimulated. And those two things look identical, but they are completely different. Okay, so let me start with what introversion actually means. Susan Kien wrote a book called Quiet, and it's one of the most read books about introversion ever written. And she defines it really clearly. She says, introversion isn't about disliking people. It's about where you get your energy from. Introverts recharge in solitude. Extroverts recharge through social interaction. That's it. That's the actual difference. Not introverts are shy people. Even most people get confused between these two concepts. But shyness is the fear of negative judgment. It's an uncomfortable emotion driven by anxiety. Introversion is simply a preference for environments that are not overstimulating. A shy person is afraid to speak up. An introvert just doesn't feel the need to speak unless they have something meaningful to say. Not that they prefer being alone all the time, just where the energy comes from. And Susan makes a point in the book that I think is really important. She says introversion exists on a spectrum, and most people sit somewhere in the middle. There's no such thing as a pure introvert or a pure extrovert. Such a person would be in a lunatic asylum. That's actually a Carl Jung's quote, the guy who coined the terms in the first place. So the binary we've all been using, introvert or extrovert, was never meant to be that rigid. But somewhere along the way, introversion became a catch-all label for something that's actually a very different problem. Now, let me explain what overstimulation actually is, because I think this is where most of us actually live, and we've been calling it something else. So, your nervous system, which is the network of signals running through your body. So, your nervous system has a capacity for input, sights, sounds, messages, decisions, social interactions, notifications, conversation, information, all of it coming in, all day, every day. And your nervous system processes all of it, but it has a limit. And when you're taking in more input than what your nervous system can comfortably process, that's overstimulation. And the symptoms look exactly like introversion. Wanting to be alone, feeling drained by social situations, needing quiet after noise, pulling away from conversation, reaching for your phone as a way to reduce the intensity of the right moment. But here's the crucial difference. If you're genuinely introverted, you recharge in solitude, regardless of how much overstimulation you've had that day. If you're overstimulated, what you need isn't solitude. What you need is for the input to stop. And in the modern world, the input almost never stops. Researcher Elian Iron, who spent decades studying what she called highly sensitive people, found that about 15 to 20% of humans have a nervous system that processes stimuli more deeply than average. Not better or worse, just more intensely. More affected by noise, crowds, conflict, rapid change, and constant input. And she found something really important. These people aren't necessarily introverts. Some are, some aren't. But all of them were suffering in environments with too much stimulation, and most of them didn't know why. I told you I reach for my phone in the middle of conversations. And for a long time, I thought that was just me being antisocial, or really not interested, or needing to be alone. But it's not that at all. Sherry Turkle wrote a book called Reclaiming Conversation. And she spent years studying how phones changed the way we relate to other people. And she found something I immediately recognized when I read it. She says phones have become what she calls a psychological refuge. When a conversation gets too intense, when the emotional stakes feel too high, when we feel slightly overwhelmed by the demands of being fully present with another person, the phone is an exit, a way to reduce the intensity without leaving the room. You're still there, you're still technically present, but you've reduced the input by about 50%. And your nervous system, if it's been running on too much all day, reaches for that reduction automatically. Not because you don't care about the person, but because you've been caring too much and your body is looking for a way to turn the volume down. That's not introversion, that's an overstimulated nervous system. And here's what I think is really important to understand. The world right now is generating more stimulation than any human nervous system was designed to handle. John Harry talks about this in his book Stolen Focus, and he says the average person in the modern world is exposed to more information in a single day than someone in the medieval era would encounter in an entire lifetime. One day versus a lifetime. Notifications, messages, emails, news, social media, content, decisions, comparisons, expectations, noise in every quiet room. Your nervous system was not built for this. Nobody's was. And Nicholas Carr makes a point in his book, The Shallows, that when you're constantly switching between inputs, tap to tap, notification to notification, conversation to phone to conversation, your brain never gets to settle. The stress response stays activated. The part of your brain that monitors for threats, the amygdala, stays on alert because the input never stops long enough for it to stand down. And when you're in that state, chronically activated, chronically inputting, of course you want to be alone. Of course you pull away from people. Of course conversations feel like too much. But it's not because you're introverted. It's because you're running on empty. And everything, including the people you love, feels like one more thing you need to process. Dr. Anna Lemke talks about the pleasure-pain balance in her book, Dopamine Nation. And I know we've talked a lot about it before, but it has a piece that really connects directly to this. When your brain has been overstimulated, when you've been getting small, constant hits of dopamine from your phone, from notifications, from the endless scroll, your dopamine baseline drops. And when your dopamine baseline drops, everything that doesn't produce a quick dopamine hit starts to feel like dull, including real conversation, including being present with people, including the slow, unoptimized, inefficient experience of being fully present with someone. Because your brain has been trained to expect constant stimulation, and real human connection doesn't deliver that. It's slower, more uncertain, less immediately rewarding. So your brain reaches for the thing that delivers that hit, which is obviously the phone. Because your dopamine system has been quietly conditioned to find real life a little bit boring. So how do you know which one you're actually dealing with? Are you genuinely introverted, someone who recharges in solitude as a fundamental part of how you're wired? Or are you overstimulated, someone who needs the input to stop before you can feel like yourself again? Here's a question that actually helped me. When was the last time you spent genuine time alone? Not scrolling, not consuming anything, just alone with your own thoughts, and felt genuinely restored after it? If the answer is yes, real solitude actually restores you. There is a good chance you're lean introverted. But if the answer is, I am alone, but I'm still on my phone, still consuming, still inputting, then you haven't been actually alone. You just changed the source of stimulation, and the exhaustion you feel around people might not be about the people at all. It might be about everything else you've been carrying all day before you even got to them. The author of the book, Quiet, makes a point near the end of the book. She says the world needs both. It needs people who think before they speak, who process deeply, who recharge in quiet. And it needs people who energize rooms, who think out loud, who feel more alive in the crowd. Neither it better. Both are necessary. But she says, and this is the part that I think about the most, the world has spent a long time treating introversion as a problem to fix, as shyness to overcome, as antisocial behavior to correct. When actually, for a lot of people, introversion was never actually the problem. The problem was an environment that never gave them the space to be exactly as they are. And I want to add something to that. For a lot of us, the environment isn't just external. It's the phone in our pocket too. The app on our screen, the constant low hum of input we carry everywhere we go. And until that changes, it's very hard to know who you are underneath all of that. Whether you're genuinely someone who prefers quiet, or whether you just haven't had quite long enough time to find out. Here is what actually helped me. Of course, not deleting everything. Of course, not dramatic digital detox. Just giving my nervous system a real break before social interactions, before social situations. Not more content before meeting people. Not scrolling on the way there. Quiet. Actual quiet. Even just for 20 minutes. No podcasts, no music, no input at all. Just letting the nervous system settle before it had to do the work of being with someone. And something shifted. The conversations that used to feel like it's too much started feeling like enough. And I started to realize that I actually like people. I always did. I just needed to stop arriving at them already full. So if you've been calling yourself introverted and it's always felt slightly not quite right, I want you to consider something. Maybe you're not someone who needs less people. Maybe you're someone who needs less noise. Those are very different things. And knowing the difference changes what you actually do about it. Because if you're introverted, protecting your alone time is the answer. But if you're overstimulated, the answer is protecting your nervous system from the constant input, from the never-ending scroll. So I think it's going to be it for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to keep up on watching, I made a video right here about why we no longer can even focus. Click here to watch. See you there. Bye.